In 1937, a Dutch art dealer walked into a Nazi official's office and left with a Vermeer. Not a print, not a copy, but what everyone believed was an original 17th century Dutch masterpiece. The buyer paid the equivalent of millions of dollars. Museums authenticated it, experts celebrated it, and for years nobody questioned it. The man who sold it was a struggling painter named Han van Meegeren, and the Vermeer was entirely fake. He had painted it himself. Art forgery is one of the oldest crimes in the world, and for a long time it was also one of the most successful. Forgers did not just fool amateur collectors. They walked into the world's most prestigious auction houses, past curators with decades of experience, and straight through the doors of museums that had spent fortunes building systems to catch exactly this kind of deception. The best forgers understood something that most people do not. Experts are not immune to wanting something to be real. They are in many ways more vulnerable than anyone else. Van Meegeren exploited this brilliantly. He spent years studying Vermeer obsessively, not just the paintings but the chemistry behind them. He sourced 17th century canvases by buying minor works from the period and scraping them clean. He mixed his own paints using lapis lazuli, lead white, and other period pigments. He even developed a method using phenol formaldehyde resin to artificially age the paint so it would crack and harden convincingly when baked in an oven. By the time he presented his first forgery to the market, it had aged 300 years in a matter of weeks. When the fake Vermeer sold, Van Meegeren sold more, then more after that. He became so confident he sold directly to Hermann Goering during the Second World War, which ultimately became his downfall. After the war, Dutch authorities charged him with collaborating with the Nazis by handing over a national treasure. Van Meegeren had no choice. He confessed that there was no national treasure because he had painted it himself. He even recreated a Vermeer in his prison cell to prove it. The court reduced his sentence and he died before serving a day of it. But his forgeries had already passed through some of the most respected hands in the art world without a single expert catching him in real time. The question forensic scientists would later ask was not whether the fakes were convincing. They clearly were. The question was why, and the answer led to one of the most important developments in art authentication. When researchers analyzed Van Meegeren's paintings decades later using radiocarbon dating and pigment analysis, they found things no one had looked for at the time. One of his fake Vermeers contained cobalt blue, a pigment that did not exist in the 17th century. It was developed in 1802. A single pigment, invisible to the naked eye, invisible to any level of visual expertise, but impossible to hide from chemical analysis. This became the foundation of modern forensic art detection. Today, investigators use X-ray fluorescence to map the elemental composition of a painting layer by layer. They use infrared reflectography to see through the surface and reveal underdrawings, since old masters typically sketched their compositions in charcoal or ink before painting over them. If a supposed Renaissance work has no underdrawing or shows a modern synthetic line, the science does not lie. They use dendrochronology, the study of tree rings, to date wooden panels to within a year of when they were cut. A panel that supposedly dates to the 15th century cannot have been made from a tree that was felled in 1970. But forensics alone cannot catch forgers. They also need time to catch up, and some forgers move faster than the science. Wolfgang Beltracchi was arguably the greatest forger of the 20th century. A German painter with extraordinary technical skill, he spent decades producing fake works attributed to Max Ernst, Heinrich Campendonck, Fernand Léger, and dozens of other modernist masters. He did not copy existing paintings. He invented new ones, works that looked exactly like something the original artist could have made but never did. Then his wife Helene, acting as his partner in the scheme, fabricated backstories for the paintings. She posed as the granddaughter of an early 20th century German collector, claiming works had been in the family for generations. Auction houses did not question it. Collectors spent tens of millions. Galleries displayed the works with pride. Beltracchi's eventual exposure came not through connoisseurship, but through a single technical error. One of his fakes contained titanium white, a pigment only commercially available from the 1920s onward. The work was supposedly from 1914. That one anachronism unraveled decades of deception. German prosecutors found over 50 forgeries. The total value of the fraudulent works sold exceeded $300 million. What both Van Meegeren and Beltracchi understood was that provenance, the documented ownership history of a work, was the most exploitable weakness in the art market. As long as a painting came with a plausible story and a convincing paper trail, even sophisticated buyers would accept it. John Drewe, a British conman who worked alongside painter John Mayet in the 1990s, took this further than anyone before him. Mayet painted fake Picassos, Braques, and Giacomettis. Drewe infiltrated the archives of major museums and art institutions, physically inserting false documents into their historical records. He added fake exhibition catalogs, forged letters, doctored photographs. When buyers did their due diligence and checked the archive confirmed the lie. It was one of the most audacious manipulation of institutional records in art history. Scotland Yard eventually caught them through conventional detective work. A disgruntled partner of Drewe's tipped off police after a personal dispute. What investigators found inside Drewe's home stunned them. He had fabricated thousands of documents, contaminated some of the most trusted archives in Britain, and moved works worth an estimated £40 million. Mayet received a short prison sentence, cooperated with authorities, and later reinvented himself as a legitimate painter of acknowledged fakes. Drewe was the one the court viewed as the true criminal. He had understood that forgery is not really about painting. It is about controlling information. That insight has driven the most significant shift in how the art world now protects itself. Forensic labs now use gas chromatography to analyze binding media in paint, separating egg tempera from linseed oil from synthetic polymers with a precision that could not be faked decades ago. Artificial intelligence systems have been trained on thousands of brushstroke samples to detect statistical anomalies in how a surface was built up. Raman spectroscopy allows researchers to identify specific mineral compounds in pigments without damaging the work. And international registries now track provenance claims against known forger networks, flagging suspicious patterns before a sale completes. The challenge is not technological, it is structural. The art market has operated for centuries on relationships, reputations, and discretion. Sales often happen without full disclosure. Provenance documents pass through private hands. Authentication decisions are made by individual scholars whose reputations are tied to the artists they champion. If an expert has spent a career studying one painter and tells a buyer that a work is genuine, it takes enormous institutional courage to challenge that judgment. Forgers have always understood this. The most successful ones did not merely reproduce a style. They reproduced the social conditions that made experts want to believe. The science has now advanced far beyond what any human eye can detect. But every time a new forensic technique is established and published, it also becomes a target. Future forgers read the same research that authenticators do. They learn which pigments to avoid, which panels to source, which archive gaps to exploit. The arms race does not end with a conviction. It continues. There are currently an estimated 50% of works on the market whose attribution is disputed or uncertain. That figure, often cited within the trade itself, is not a scandal that anyone announces. It moves through the industry quietly, the way water moves through old walls. Every major auction house has works in its inventory that have never been subjected to full forensic testing. Every major museum has pieces in its collection that have not been re-examined since they were acquired. The tools now exist to do it. The will to disturb a settled story is another matter entirely. What the stories of Van Meegeren, Beltracchi, Mayet, and Drewe share is not a technique. It is a mindset. Each of them understood the art world better than the art world understood itself. They studied its vanities, its institutional blind spots, its desperate desire to discover something extraordinary, and they gave the market exactly what it wanted. The only difference between a genuine masterpiece and a brilliant forgery for a very long time was whether anybody had looked closely enough. Now, for the first time in history, the